All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Planet Earth celebration with the Marine Education and Research Society. My name's Caitlin Birdsall. I am the Executive Director of MERS, and I will be your host tonight. I'm joined by an incredible panel who you will meet in just a moment. Really, our goal tonight is to take you behind the scenes into what was a really big milestone for MERS, being part of this huge global award-winning documentary series. We're going to talk about how we came to be part of this opportunity. We're going to talk about the filming process. We're going to hear from the world-renowned cinematographers that worked with us, as well as our staff. We'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions. And of course, we're going to watch the segment that MERS was involved with in episode 7 of Planet Earth 3, just released today in Canada. We'll also have the opportunity to talk a little bit about our web exclusive that was made about our work at MERS and some of the conservation concerns we still have surrounding humpback whales off the coast of British Columbia. Next slide, Jackie. Fantastic. Before we get too far into this, though, we do want to take a moment to gratefully and respectfully acknowledge that the Marine Education and Research Society works and learns in the territory of the Kwakwaka'wakw people. Next slide there. So we are on Zoom tonight, and if the pandemic taught us anything, it was how to use Zoom. So hopefully everyone is familiar with this platform, but if it's been a few years since you attended a webinar, I am going to pause for a minute and pass it over to our technical support, our new communications assistant, Effie, to run us through how to participate in our webinar tonight. So over to you, Effie.
All right, yeah, so as you all can see, you are muted and your camera is off. It's supposed to be like that, so do not try to change that, please. Before this webinar, we have already received some questions. During the webinar, you do have the opportunity to ask questions. You can do this by using the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen, and if you're on your phone, it will also have a Q&A function. We cannot guarantee that every single question will be answered, but we'll try our best. And if you have any further technical difficulties, you can reach out directly to me. And then we also have a poll and a quiz coming up, which I will launch right now. You can make sure to scroll down so you can see all the options. And yeah, we'll take a moment to view your answers, and then we'll continue on.
Please let us know where you are signing in from tonight. We have over 140 of you that have already joined us, and we'd love to hear where you are. Great, we'll just take another moment and then I'll get Effie to close the poll so we can see where we all are joining us this evening.
93%, over almost 100% of you have answered, so I am going to close it now.
All right, so it looks like many of you are local here in Canada, in BC, around Vancouver Island. We're so glad to have so many of our community joining us tonight. Looks like we do have a few people coming from further away, including into the United States and all the way in New Zealand or Australia. So if you are joining us from further afield, thanks so much for taking the opportunity. I hope it's not too late or too early for you. And for those of you locals, I do want to acknowledge that the Canucks are playing their first playoff game in 9 years tonight, and you have chosen to spend your time with us. So we appreciate that very, very much. Fantastic. Well, we're so grateful to have you all here. We'll move on to the next slide there. And we did want to take a bit of an opportunity to thank you guys all for joining us. And this will happen at the end of the webinar tonight. We should be wrapped up around 9 o'clock. And at that time, if you stay with us all the way to the end, we will be doing a draw for one of our Humpback sponsorships. It is not any old whale. It is the star of Planet Earth 3 that you will be sponsoring. His name is Conger. You're going to learn all about Conger tonight. And our Humpback sponsorship is one of our fundraising programs where you get a bio of your whale, a sticker of its tail, and then you get access to our sponsorship hub with exclusive content and update about your whales throughout the year. So we'll do that at the end for someone who's joined us tonight as a thank you for being here to celebrate this moment. Now, for those of you that maybe aren't local, we did want to spend a quick minute telling you who we are at the Marine Education and Research Society. So we are a registered Canadian charity, and our mission really is to promote the conservation and understanding of marine ecosystems. We are based on Northern Vancouver Island in the community of Port McNeill. Now, our work around marine conservation really revolves around three key pillars: research, education, and response. And we really believe that all of these are equally important and that each inform the other, and that our goal here is to have a really holistic and integrated approach to marine conservation. Now, working with the BBC allowed us really to enact a lot of these key pillars as well, including highlighting our research, providing an amazing platform for education, and also delving into things like threats to these animals and how we might reduce them as well. Next slide there, Jackie. So that's how we came to be, or that's who we are. But of course, we are joined also by a wonderful panel of our MERS superstars, as well as some of the cinematographers that we were lucky enough to work with on this Planet Earth 3 episode. So I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves and to talk a little bit about how they came to be involved in this project. And we are going to start off with Bertie Gregory. Unfortunately, Bertie could not join us tonight. He is busy at award shows, getting onto planes, filming penguins in Antarctica, but he did send us some messages. So we'll start off with Bertie and then we'll move on to the rest of our panel.
Hey everybody, I hope you're well. My name's Bertie Gregory. I'm a wildlife filmmaker. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you there today. I'm currently traveling and have a crazy schedule between projects. I was really excited to be part of the Planet Earth 3 team that filmed your lovely humpback whales off Vancouver Island. And I got involved in the project because I've known Freddie, the producer, for quite a few years. I first met him when he was working on Planet Earth 2. He was making the cities episode, so all about how our wildlife is adapting to living in cities. And one of the stories that he was filming was the leopards in Mumbai. So Mumbai has one of the highest concentrations of wild leopards on Earth, even though it's, I think, the third biggest city on Earth. And I was working on a similar project at that time. So he was looking for some footage to buy for his episode, and so bought some of the footage that I'd shot. So that's how we first met. And then I later started working for the BBC Natural History Unit as one of their kind of in-house camera people. It was called the Camera Bursary. And I was attached to the project that Freddie was then working on, which was called Seven Worlds. And he was working on the Antarctic episode. And he has always been a really amazing mentor to me and gave me some really awesome opportunities. We went all over the place in Antarctica filming fin whales and penguins and leopard seals and all kinds of fun stuff. That's a very long-winded way of saying then when he started working on Planet Earth 3, we met up and he said, I've got a really cool story that I'd love you to film on about the humpback whales. And so, yeah, we went out and had an amazing shoot with Jackie and the team. And yeah, can't get enough of those humpbacks.
Fantastic. All right. Well, from leopards in Mumbai to Monterey, we have Hayes Baxley. Hayes, if you could do a quick intro.
Sure. Hey, I'm Hayes Baxley, and I'm a cinematographer focusing on natural history stories. And for years, have done a lot of similar projects with BBC and a lot of the big streaming platforms like Netflix and Disney. And years back, I worked on a Disney series called Secret of the Whales that kind of really launched, I guess, my career in a very whale-centric way. And since then have traveled all over the world filming all different kinds of whales, but humpbacks have still been very special to me. And I have gotten to travel from Antarctica to parts of Southeast Asia to film humpbacks. And it's amazing, these humpbacks that you all have here in Vancouver Island. This is just an absolutely extraordinary behavior, and it's been special to see that behavior and see other behaviors around the world, and to see all the work that's happening in Vancouver. And I met Jackie years and years ago. I was on a small independent film project, sailing around Vancouver Island, and just happened to connect. And it's been wonderful to be able to come back on the Planet Earth 3 project to really, film this story and get it out to the masses.
Awesome. Well, we're so honored to have you join us today, Hayes. We'll hear more from Hayes in a moment, but now we're going to move on to BC's best cinematographer, we might say, Tavish Campbell.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Tavish Campbell, and I've known Jackie for quite a while. I was actually with Jackie over 10 years ago when we first saw conger trap feeding. We didn't really know what it was then. I didn't know whether he just had a stick stuck crossways in his mouth. But yeah, Jackie's been and MERS has been yeah, pretty influential in my life here on the coast. And certainly working with Jackie. Jackie's been a huge inspiration for me. So when the opportunity came up to work with Jackie and work on this project filming, it was kind of a no-brainer, and I jumped on it right away. So it was very special to be back in Blackfish Sound, looking for conger again after all those years.
Awesome. And it's really great to have you as well, Tavish, and so special to have your connection to Jackie and MERS here tonight. All right, onwards to our fabulous dynamic duo with MERS. We'll pass it over to Christy, who is our co-founder and our science lead.
Yeah, hi, thanks so much. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. Yeah, as Caitlin mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of MERS. I'm currently our science lead, and I guess I could attribute the very start of getting involved in this project when Jackie first hired me in 2005 to work on a whale watching boat. And in 2010, we started MERS. And throughout all of these years, almost 20 years now, we've really been working to know who the humpback whales are, to share that information about them with the world, and to study their populations and the threats to them so we can help protect them. Specifically, how I got involved in the filming was I was living down in Vancouver at the time, and Jackie called me and said, "Oh, you really need to get up here. There's this producer who's coming, and they want to, check out the Northern Vancouver Island area to see if they want to film here." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. That's a lot of work. I was going to have a weekend off." And got up there and had the most amazing day out on the water, which Jackie will talk about shortly, and knew already after that one day how big a deal this was going to be for humpbacks, for MERS, for the whole ecosystem. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Christy. And then on to someone, if you are on the coast of BC, you probably don't need an introduction to our other co-founder, humpback researcher and director of education, Jackie Heldring.
Hi, everybody, and so grateful for everybody who has showed up and taken the time. So Jackie Hildering, one of the co-founders of MERS, but wouldn't exist without Christy, yeah, and Caitlin. And the huge beauty of this is that we could not have seen when we were just a group of friends who wanted to know who the whales were and to make it count that would ever lead to this. So thank you so much for being part of the celebration, and that it allowed as well reconnecting with Hayes and working with Tavish is absolutely enormous. So humpback researcher, and then also the communications and education lead.
Great. Well, we are so grateful to have such an awesome panel, and I'll get you to move it on to the next slide there, Jackie. Now, all of this came together under the directorship of one man, Freddie Debath. Unfortunately, it's 3:38 in the morning in the UK where Freddie lives, so he can't join us today. But luckily, Freddie, the producer of episode 7 of Planet Earth 3, was able to celebrate with Jackie when she attended the showing of the episode in the UK back in December. And we'll hear a little bit more about how Freddie came to join us here. So the next part, before we watch the actual segment, we want to talk a little bit about how we got here. How did MERS get involved with this global nature documentary series? What led them to us here? Well, it started with Freddie and a phone call to Jackie, and I'll let her maybe move on there and tell that story.
Except I think first we're telling the story about Jackie.
No, sorry. It started with Freddie and a phone call to Jackie about a behavior. My mistake of the thing. Freddie was really interested in a paper that we put out in 2018 about a particular behavior. And so before we hear about Freddie coming out, we'll talk about what made him so interested in that, in this behavior. And I'll pass it over to Christy, my mistake.
Thanks so much. So yeah, Christy McMillan here again, and yeah, telling you a little bit more about trap feeding, the new feeding strategy in humpback whales that really caught the BBC's attention. So Jackie and Tavish have already referenced back in 2011, they started seeing a feeding behavior off northern Vancouver Island that no one had ever described for humpback whales before. Conger, who was a young humpback whale at the time, was sitting almost stationary at the surface with birds feeding on prey next to him. And he was just kind of slowly rotating at the surface there with his mouth wide open, and then sometimes using that flipper to flick a wave of prey toward his mouth. Now, we had no idea at the beginning what exactly was going on here. But because MERS had already been studying the humpback whales as individuals off northeastern Vancouver Island, we knew that in 2011, only Conger and one other young male humpback whale named Moonstar were seen doing this behavior. As of the end of 2023, MERS and our collaborators have documented at least 33 individual humpback whales that have learned to use this new behavior off of northern Vancouver Island. We started to refer to this feeding behavior as trap feeding. It reminded us of how a Venus flytrap catches flies. These whales are basically just sitting there with their mouths wide open, waiting for the prey to come to them. Now, in seeing this behavior being used by more and more humpback whales in such a short time, we figured that it must be providing some kind of a benefit to the whales, but we didn't know why they were doing it, why they started doing it, or even, the humpback whales weren't trap feeding all the time. They would still use other feeding behaviors like lunge feeding or solo bubble net feeding. So we wanted to better understand what led to this feeding behavior and when the whales were doing it. So one of the theories we kind of had at the beginning was, well, maybe they're feeding on a different prey when they're doing this new feeding behavior that we called trap feeding. And I happened to be working on my master's degree at the time, and part of that included filming a lot of schools of herring underwater, the ones that humpback whales were lunge feeding on. And this is what a typical school of herring looks like that the whales would lunge feed on. Really dense schools of herring made up of thousands of fish. And then we started filming what the whales fed on when they were trap feeding. We found it was also juvenile herring. It was the same type of prey, but that the schools of herring that they were feeding on when they were trap feeding looked a whole lot different than when they were lunge feeding. So the schools of fish they were feeding on in this case, there were usually, instead of thousands, maybe 50 fish in that school, much more diffuse, much smaller school of fish. So, okay, that started giving us a clue of what might be going on here. And so what we came to learn was that the humpback whales, when there's big, dense schools of fish like this, the humpback whales can afford to use a higher energy, an energetically costly feeding strategy called lunge feeding. So when lunge feeding, whales will accelerate towards their prey. It takes lots of energy to do it. Then they open their mouths. It creates a whole lot of drag, slows the whale way down, so they have to speed back up again. So it's a big, high energy move for the whales to be able to feed in this way, which is fine as long as they're getting enough prey each time that they have to do this whole maneuver. Trap feeding, on the other hand, the whale is just slowly opening its mouth at the surface. It's not accelerating towards those prey. It's not creating that huge amount of drag. It might be slowly kind of rotating on the surface, but not using nearly as much energy. So we figured that trap feeding was really a way that the whales could benefit from these much smaller, much more diffuse schools of fish and still get an energy benefit from them. And as Caitlin mentioned, we published on this research back in 2018 to really kind of share with the world that this new feeding behavior was happening and when. We also were tracking who the whales were that were doing the trap feeding. As I mentioned, in that first year in 2011, it was only Conger and Moonstar that learned to do this. And we were identifying the whales that were trap feeding based on their flukes or tails, which is very normal for humpback whales. Also based on their dorsal fins, so the fins on their backs, which MERS has been doing for a long time. And then we even got even more dedicated. We were identifying the whales by their mouths, because we would get these fantastic videos of a humpback whale trap feeding and trap feeding and trap feeding. And then just when its dorsal fin would come up, the video would cut out and be like, we don't know who it was. So now we've put together a catalog of humpback whales' mouths so we can even more easily track who the whales are that are learning this feeding behavior. And what we found was that the whales that were most likely to learn to trap feed were ones that spent the most days per year off northeastern Vancouver Island, but were also the ones that associated more often with other trap feeding whales instead of whales that don't trap feed. So all kind of providing evidence that these whales are learning this new behavior from each other, which is something we call cultural transmission, kind of learning it through culture, through learning it from other whales. And the last question we kind of had to try to figure out here is how exactly does trap feeding work? Now, I think part of that comes from a clue of what herring do when they're in danger. So herring tend to school up when they're threatened. They'll school sometimes under floating kelp or floating logs or a boat. In the case of trap feeding, the fish are being pursued by diving birds pursuing them from underneath, from gulls that are pursuing them from above. And that nice big shelter that just happens to be a whale's mouth looks like a pretty good place to be schooling next to or schooling inside of. And then all the whale has to do is close its mouth to be able to feed on these prey. So again, we never could have had any idea that this feeding behavior that Tavish and Jackie first saw back in 2011 could possibly lead to this attention from the BBC. But it really was this paper and these videos that kind of attracted Freddie's attention to us in the first place.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Christy. It's such a great description of this novel behavior that was so intriguing to Freddie and the crew at BBC. Now, we did film with the BBC over 2 years. And so Jackie, before we watch this episode, is going to take us a little bit through what filming was like on Northern Vancouver Island. And then we'll also hear from Hayes and Tavish and Bertie as well about their experience.
Yeah, so this photo, Tavish, I dug it back up, is from October the 13th, 2011, when he and I were working together and came across Conger and wondered what on earth he was doing. I dare say that my younger colleagues did not believe I had even seen something that was particularly special. But yeah, that it led to this, because that was the initial interest that Freddie DeVas had in our work. And then the email exchange started, and we, to be honest, get approached by a lot of film crews, and there is a lot of, in the beginning, going back and forth going, is this a match ethically? Is it, if we're going to work with them, worth our time? But also, like, what are the conservation gains for this? So it started off in 2018 with the first contact. Freddie came in 2019 for 1 week, and oh my, what he got to see and was very surprised. I remember moments that, for example, it happened to be that Jigger the humpback was solo bubble net feeding, and I could hear the rush of bubbles. So I would turn and say to Freddie, like, look over there. She doesn't usually do this, but she's solo bubble net feeding. And to have his head flick backwards and go, how did you know? Yeah, or that a large vessel went by and a whale would start breaching, or that we would know who was likely to trap feed. And he had no problems whatsoever in that first orientation or recce week to see trap feeding abundantly. But then when he came, oh, sorry, and very importantly, within that, I called Christy to come up. And I'll never forget how in that first week in 2019, we were going to go to dinner together to talk about details further about working together. But we actually just drifted down, shut off the engine, and the tide carried us back to Telegraph Cove as we talked about the possibility and conservation and the way we were connected in terms of ethics. And then it was dark by the time that we arrived, and my old truck on the tailgate, Freddie asked if he could show us some footage. And I think up till then, we didn't really get what was going on. And then Freddie said, what I'm going to show you. And it was from Frozen Planet. He goes, this is the version where it's still my voice and not Sir David Attenborough's. And Christy and I looked at one another, and I think our brains like mutually exploded about what on earth is going on. In 2020, there was no filming. We know why. 2021, there were 3 weeks with Birdie, and that was supposed to be the only filming, never on the horizon that there'd be the joy of working with Hayes again or with Tavish. And the reason that they came back is because of one bird species, short-tailed shearwaters. Oh, the film crew, Birdie and Freddie, were so happy with the short-tailed shearwaters initially. There was an unusual intrusion, it's called, of them. They haven't returned in those kinds of numbers since. And they are wonderful and beautiful and really testify to the biodiversity of the area, but they also dive down, splitting apart the fish. So you couldn't get trap feeding. There was only one time that we saw it around the corner. So Christy then, as things were kind of getting frenzied, like we need to get this footage, Christy said, well, why don't you come back next year, but just with the drones, not with all the other equipment. And that's how Hayes and Tavish got involved. And I certainly was very, very happy to put those names forward, knowing of how kindred we are in terms of ethics and in skills. Could never have imagined our little research boat would be tricked out like this. I did not dare until today look up the price for this lens. Yeah, $98,000 Canadian before taxes. Yeah, I looked that up today. So the amount of gear, the weight of the gear, I had to counterbalance the front of our boat. Yeah, dealing with all kinds of weather conditions, using the drone in order to judge where the fog wasn't. Yeah, so there was all of this going on with me, of course, like needing to know who the whales are, trying to make sure, because this is it. We want it to count for conservation. We want them to have the footage without bothering the whales. But the area kind of speaks for itself. So this is from that first filming year. This is the kind of like extraordinary aching beauty that we shared together on this little boat. And then the cast of characters that you'll see, in addition to Conger, who is in this compilation of the segment of the episode we're going to show from you, Inukshuk is the one who's breaching. He's also the one who's got the doll's porpoises, the doll's porpoise escort around his head. Trinity is the whale that you see down here. We got really excited in that first year of filming because we thought she was actually going to trap feed. Yeah, open goes the mouth. This is it. It's happening. And what happens? Short-tailed shearwaters came out of her mouth because she captured them accidentally in the mouth. So that didn't happen that year either. There's Ripple and her calf Dapple that repeatedly, like mother and calf, stayed further distance away, but incredibly beautiful footage. Tavish got footage of the calf Kavu playing, like he captured this with the drone, playing with a big lion's mane jelly. That didn't end up in this footage, but it is going to end up somewhere down the line. Black Pearl is repeated in here. Argonaut, yeah, it was breaching in it. Hunter breaching again and again as the Washington State Ferry went by, and also rolling around in the kelp. He's also the whale at the end of the web episode that we'll show you. Yahtzee was lunge feeding incredibly. And then there is the epic that 3 of them, yeah, just near the end of the second year of filming, 3 of them were trap feeding together, which was incredible. But there's also so much more than just the humpbacks because of this. Of course, this is testifying to how extraordinary this whole area is. So yes, short-tailed shearwaters, the diving birds that Christy referenced, rhinoceros auklets, common MERS, the gulls, incredible footage of bald eagles included, harbor seals that even ended up in the mouths of the humpbacks. That footage will pop up sometime in the future as well. Yeah, Dall's porpoises, and also stellar sea lions. When you see the footage, you'll see that there's suddenly stellar sea lions advancing. The background of what actually happened there was that northern resident orca were coming up on the stellar sea lion haulouts, and I suggested they'd want to film because I didn't know how the sea lions were going to respond, but they were responding because they didn't know what kind of orca those were that came around the corner. So when you see the footage, also please know that the underwater footage was not part of what we worked on with the humpbacks. There's some historical footage there from this area, and then there's also footage from other areas. And then the joy, yeah, as much as it was beautiful working like in the environment, but what a beautiful thing to be working with people you care about. Yeah, that this resulted from friends being together, that there was already the connection with Tavish, the connection with Hayes. And then this fuzzy picture in the upper right corner was a magic moment for our team. Caitlin was there that day, Nicole was there, Our summer staff was there. A research associate was there getting oriented and trained. And then off in the corner, you have a couple of semi-famous people working like crazy on finishing up with their footage before they got on the airplane.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jackie. It's really cool to hear about how the filming process went. Now, Hayes, Tavish, Bertie, we want to hear from you guys before we watch this. What were some of the biggest challenges in filming? What were some of the most memorable things that happened while you were filming? And is there anything that you want people to pay attention to just before we watch the segment? Hayes, we'll start with you.
Vancouver Island is I love Vancouver Island. Anytime I get to spend time there, I'm thrilled. But it's not always an easy place to film. We definitely had lots of days where fog makes it pretty tough to find whales. And then I think one of the other bigger challenges for a sequence like this is you're going for a very specific behavior. Typically, in this case, maybe even with a very specific whale. And it's, it can be tough to just go out and film a whale in the first place and get these kind of beautiful, iconic shots. And then you're going to compound that challenge by maybe a behavior that's one of maybe several feeding strategies that these whales do. But you really just want this one specific one. So what you really need on your side is time. Time ends up being a huge asset. And it was fantastic that BBC gave us the time that we needed to be there before we saw trap feeding. And it did take some time. And once we finally saw it, it was amazing. It's kind of this like incredible moment, but it's also stressful because you know how many years this has been in the making and how important it is to get this footage. And trap feeding, you don't really have any kind of a lead up to it necessarily. Sometimes you're seeing the whales. Most of the time, you don't even see the whales beneath the surface. And a lot of times, maybe it'll just be a lunge. So you never know what they're going to do until it's like moments before they're at the surface. So being in the right place, trying to like use your instincts from watching the whales as much as you can to have the cameras and the drone in the right place. And there's a lot of misses. Sometimes the shots don't work, but we got lucky and we had some great success on this one, and it was really amazing.
For me, the whole thing was memorable, mainly because in BC, we don't get many opportunities to observe humpbacks with a drone. We don't film them with a drone because it's illegal, unless you have a permit, and it's hard to get a permit. So, having watched humpbacks a lot from water level, the whole thing was incredibly memorable. As much as I was focusing on trying to get the shot, I was also fascinated in just watching what was unfolding in my screen. The minute you get up in the air and you're looking down and seeing that bait ball, and seeing the humpbacks either lunging through it or coming up to trap feed, it's awesome. It's so revealing. But like Hayes said, it just comes down to like putting the time in the air. So that was like the big challenge, is that you can only be in the air for so long on any one given battery, and you never know when that moment is going to be when the whale comes up and starts trap feeding. So you're just in the air as much as you can. And every time you have to come back to the boat to change a battery, you're kind of doing it very reluctantly because you're thinking, oh, is this going to be the moment where someone comes up and trap feeds? And probably one memorable moment for me is that right on day one, unfortunately, I lost a drone, and I wasn't necessarily going to talk about this, but I think I should. I was very embarrassed because I was supposed to be out here doing this big gig, and then here I lost a drone, and I was embarrassed because I was polluting the ocean with plastic. And anyhow, we were able to get another drone up and continue to shoot. Actually, Louisa Gilbert helped us out and got another drone. Anyhow, the next day we were back in action and we were shooting, and I was hovering over this bait ball, and there was tons of gulls coming and feeding on this bait ball, and I was hovering maybe about 40 or 50 feet up. And all of a sudden, I'm looking down at my screen, and all of a sudden, I see this juvenile eagle has come down and has grabbed two big fistfuls of herring out of the middle of this bait ball. And then she's rising up and she's flying straight towards my drone. And usually bird strikes are not really an issue because birds are very aware of where they're going. But unfortunately, this eagle was looking down because she was trying to eat some of the herring that were in her talons. And I just see this eagle flying straight towards the drone with her head down, focusing on her herring. And I was just thinking, oh, good Lord, I'm going to lose another drone.
Filming the humpbacks was magic, and what I think I love most about it is that, you know, very rarely when you're filming whales are you filming known individuals, and to have Jackie and the team's knowledge so that you'd bump into a humpback and then not just go, oh look, there's a humpback whale. It would be, oh, there's Conger, or there's, you know, whichever individual it was, and using that information to then inform how we approached, how we filmed that whale, what might happen next. You know, having that, really the key to filming wildlife. Yes, you need to know about cameras, but really you need to find the person that knows the thing. That's what we always say. And so we were very lucky to have found Jackie, who knows the thing. And so having that knowledge, being able to predict how the whales were going to interact, who was going to get priority on the different bait balls, that was amazing. I think probably the two highlights on the shoot for me, one was seeing trap feeding for the first time. I remember we just came around this corner right towards the end of the shoot, and we just saw Conger upright, backlit, silhouetted against the setting sun. And we actually didn't get the camera out fast enough to film it, but that picture is on this sensor rather than the camera sensor. So yeah, that's unfortunately one we won't get to share with the world, but it's saved in my memory. So that was very cool. And the other real highlight was the surprise of the huge numbers of short-tailed shearwaters that we were seeing. And it actually made filming very difficult because they would smash the bait balls anytime the rhino auklets and the smaller diving birds would get a ball of herring up to the surface, which would be when the humpbacks would normally hit them. The short-tailed shearwaters would get there ahead of the humpbacks, and they just it looked like a machine gun from an aeroplane going brrr. It was all the shearwaters dived in, and they'd smash the bait ball to pieces. It would lose its form, and then the humpbacks wouldn't really have anything to hit. So it was very epic because it meant there were just birds everywhere, and seeing that machine gunning was awesome. But it made filming the actual bait balls very difficult, and it made trap feeding much rarer because in order for trap feeding to happen, they need a really stable bait ball. And so yeah, the shearwaters, short-tailed shearwaters, tongue twister, were really messing that up. But yeah, very cool to see them, and it certainly added a huge amount of energy to the final sequence in the film.
I think it's almost time for us to watch the segment from episode 7, the human episode that MERS was involved with. So you can watch for those short-tailed shearwaters. You can imagine the eagle almost running into Tavish's drone. And you can, picture being out there with Hayes, Tavish, Jackie, Bertie, and Christy. And so without further ado, we will watch our segment. Every time I watch it, I get goosebumps. Really, really spectacular footage to all our cinematographers, and Jackie and Christy, you guys made this happen. So it's so special to get to watch it with the 170 odd people who are here with us today, and to see our North Island backyards really emphasized in this spectacular way. So now that we've finally seen the clip, and I hope you will go back and watch it again, you can watch it now in Canada. It was released as of today. We have some questions. This is our opportunity to ask questions of our fantastic panel. And so please feel free to put them in the Q&A. And to start off, I'm going to use a couple of the questions that came in through our registration process. So Jackie and Christy, this first one is for you. Robin is wondering if you can tell us about what you found the most fulfilling part of the filming process. Not so much the science, but the actual filming process.
You want to start?
You go.
I think, I think Bertie was already the one who referenced this, but, joining the shoot partway through and really seeing Jackie in action, working with Freddie, with Bertie, and this whole idea of all this, hours and hours and hours putting into who is that humpback and what is it doing and why are we at 3 a.m. trying to identify them. All of a sudden, that knowledge of who the whales were was being put to being used for something that we never could have imagined. And the idea of not only being able to say, oh, these are the whales that are likely to trap feed. Oh, if we stay near Congo, we're likely to see it. But the idea of David Attenborough saying names of whales that we knew, and then actually hearing that come out there, I don't know that anything will ever make me more excited than that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's similar. Like when we started all of this, like I can remember that it began with asking a Jim Darling to come up to Northern Vancouver Island and to see the situation and ask, are we crazy that this is an extraordinary situation? And because the humpback started coming back from the brink of extinction, and that it would lead to our organization forming again, like kindred people who cared about one another, and the environment in the way that we did, and where it is education informing research, to actually then have people of the caliber that we had on the boat, then seeing their response to this area and the knowledge that we have acquired, because you don't know yourself when you're involved in it, you don't know that it's exceptional, but to see how it could be put to the use for conservation, and I feel a bit awkward saying it this way, but to be able to apply that knowledge for conservation's sake, to speak for the whales and to try to make it count, was exceptional. It was something that I don't think we ever could have realized we'd be doing. And yeah, that's it for me.
Awesome. All right, Tavish, I have a question that's come in specifically for you. It's from Megan, and she asks, having grown up in this area and having watched the return of humpbacks, how did it feel to you to be asked to come on board as an operator, a camera operator, and use your specific skills to help document a monumentally positive spectacle of nature? So yeah, over to you, Tavish.
Yeah, it was very cool. I mean, I'm always keen for the opportunity to work with Jackie. So when she called the winter before we filmed, I was yeah, I was on board immediately. And then once I heard exactly what it was going to be and who we were trying to film, yeah, it just made it so much more special. So yeah, like we said, it was over 10 years ago. We were both on a boat running a tourism trip, and Conger came out of the water with his mouth open, and no one really had any clue what was going on. There was lots of questions coming from the guests as to what he was doing, and we were all just kind of guessing at that point. Um, so incredibly special to be able to go back and know that it was the same whale. I can't even describe what that's like, knowing that these individual whales are swimming around, and that people like Jackie, and everyone at MERS and people on the North Island, that they start to build and develop these relationships with these individual whales and start to know them, kind of like you would know another person. You start to know their personalities and their habits and where they're feeding. So it was really special, for me to be able to go back and be a part of that, for sure.
Fantastic. And certainly we know, Tavish, that you have also witnessed the comeback of humpback whales and have been part of documenting that. So really, that's really fantastic. All right, Hayes, I have a question for you. And this is a little bit different. So Justin asked, why did the film crew choose to present the Northeast Pacific population of humpback whales over other populations of humpback whales? And Hayes, being someone who has filmed whales all over the world, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about why, beyond just trap feeding, why one might want to specifically film humpback whales off Northern Vancouver Island instead of elsewhere in the world. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Yeah,
There
good
we go.
question. And I mean, to me, humpbacks are special all over the world. But what I love about this story and this location that I think is potentially unique compared to other parts of the world is how much human interaction these humpbacks are engaging with from boats. This is a high traffic area for these humpbacks, and I think this place is an example for the rest of the world, and how we can protect these humpbacks and what we can do to make it a safe place for humpbacks to come back to every year. So for me, that's one of the reasons why I think this story individually stands out amongst many others. And it's yeah, it is really is this example for us all to look to for other places where whales are commonly encountering boats.
Awesome. Thank you, Hayes. All right, I have another question. This might be one for Christy, perhaps. This is from Deborah. She's asking, I read that between 2012 and 2021, an estimated 7,000 humpback whales in the Pacific starved to death because of the warm water blob. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So I think that that information came from a paper that actually Caitlin and Jackie and I were all co-authors on. It was a huge North Pacific wide effort to update the population abundance of humpback whales for the whole North Pacific Ocean for the first time since 2006. One thing to just correct is it's not necessarily that 7,000 whales starved to death. It is that the population estimate of humpback whales for the whole North Pacific decreased from between 2012 and 2021. And that could be not just whales that have passed away, but fewer calves being born. But regardless, it was put forward by all of us authors in the paper that this time of decline in humpback whales did correspond with the blob, this warm water, this marine heat wave that caused warming waters to be less productive, less food for humpback whales and other species too, Cassin's auklets, which are little birds, or gray whales. We saw impacts on a lot of other species throughout the ecosystem as well. And I think it's incredibly important because it also it reminds us that, you know, we talk about humpback whales and the comeback and our second chance with humpbacks being so important. But I think it's a really important reminder that human activity still has the potential to impact these whales so much through our actions that lead to climate change, through how we drive our boats, through how we how we fish, all of these pieces that can lead to that. And so well, it is amazing to see the efforts being put in and the collaborations throughout the whole ocean to study these. It is really underscoring how important it is that we remember that these whales are not totally out of the woods yet, and that our actions really can impact them a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christy. I'm going to give you each a question, one more question, and then we are going to get to our web exclusive. And then, oh, sorry, actually, first I'll have a question for you all. But my next question is for Jackie. I'm going to combine two together that just came in through our Q&A. One is from Gerald that says, is the lunging technique or the trap feeding unique to Van Isle whales? And how did Conger learn this? And then Jetta Holmes also asks, has anyone seen humpbacks trap feeding elsewhere in the world?
So Christy will end up jumping in here as well. And thank you, all of you, for the questions. So we don't know how Conger learned this. The research paper that Christy's the lead on, our MERS research paper, is that the whales are learning it from one another. So there's a correlation between, so we've gone from 2 that we knew of never having caught them do this before in 2011 to more than, there must be more than 33, but 33 that we know have learned it from one another. There's only one case where a calf learned from their mother that we're aware of. But who Conger, or was Moonstar the first? Yeah, it's just that we happen to see Conger first. We do not know. We don't know either if this is in correlation to there being less herring. And we also have with other feeding strategies, so it's again Christie's research, that the humpbacks of northeastern Vancouver Island specifically, so humpbacks are not blundering up and down the coast. These are neighbors who are coming back to areas where they know the tides, they know how to feed. So it's very specific. They come back like big neighbors do. And Christie's research supports that for northeastern Vancouver Island, they're predominantly specialists in feeding, lunge feeding, specifically on juvenile herring. So that usually works the best. If it's in less dense concentrations, you can get some other snacks with less energy using trap feeding. But we've also seen years like 2017 where suddenly whales that we didn't know could solo bubble net feed, using on when the water is calm, using bubbles to trap, again, herring. Is that correlated to lack of herring? We don't know. And has it been seen anywhere else? So this goes over to Christy.
Yeah, so first to just clarify, lunge feeding is certainly a feeding strategy that is seen in humpback whales in all the oceans, in the Atlantic as well, and in the Southern Ocean. Though different humpback whales lunge feed on different prey. So some eat krill mostly, some lunge feed down at depth more often. We see this lunge feeding on the surface on these juvenile herring, but so lunge feeding absolutely seen in all oceans, seen in many humpback whales. Trap feeding, however, no. So trap feeding had never been described anywhere else in the world. The closest behavior to trap feeding that's been described anywhere is a feeding behavior among a species called Bruda's whales in the Gulf of Thailand. And for a really interesting coincidence, the researchers that first saw that feeding behavior and documented it. It was right around the same time we first started seeing trap feeding, and I've been part of actually panel discussions with the researchers that led that study. So a similar type feeding strategy in different whales. There was recently a paper showing that possibly like 1500 years ago, some humpback whales anciently trap fed, although the evidence is a little bit of it's a
It's a
cool theory.
hypothesis.
Yeah. But no, so when we saw trap feeding, when Jackie first described what she and Tavish had seen, we couldn't relate it to any other feeding behavior we'd seen anywhere else. We'd never seen anything written about it before. So pretty spectacular.
And we will not be surprised that there are other humpbacks that we start seeing further to the north, other humpbacks that are lunge feeding at the surface and emphasizing again, they lunge feed below and also lunge feed on krill. But that it would not surprise us if it gets seen in other parts of British Columbia coast on whales that also lunge feed near the surface, that they learn it from one of the 33 or more humpbacks. But all the ones that we know have done it, there's a greater chance that they learn if they're Northeast Vancouver Island feeders and if they hang out with other animals who know how to trap feed.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. All right. So I have one for you, Tavish. It's an anonymous question, but it says, for what special skills and challenges come with filming with a drone besides losing one, battery changes, and wayward eagles? So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about working with drones.
Yeah, I mean, there's challenges with the actual flying of the drone, but I think more importantly, when you're trying to film an animal, is just understanding the behavior of the animal, and that's why it was so incredible working with Jackie. Like it's been referenced already, but um, I think that's the main challenge: is anticipating what the whale is going to do and when it's going to do it. Um, when I was there that week, there wasn't much trap feeding, but there was a lot of lunge feeding going on. And the trick with that is that you can't keep your drone in the air indefinitely, obviously, but you never really know when these bait balls are going to start and how long they're going to last for. So we'd be out there scanning, and then you'd see like you'd notice, or Jackie would notice a couple gulls heading like really seriously in one direction. Then you'd be scanning in the binoculars over there and you'd start to see a bit of a bait ball forming, and you'd throw the drone up as fast as you could and fly over there and then hover on top of the bait ball, waiting for potentially a conger or another humpback to come and lunge through the bait ball. So yeah, a big part of it is just, yeah, understanding the behavior of the animals, as well as just getting the drone safely back to the boat. So we're in Jackie's little boat, which is a great boat, but sometimes in the summer it's blowing westerly and it's choppy and it's windy, and she's driving this way and I'm flying the drone that way, and Freddie's up in the bow trying to catch it with his big leather gloves. And yeah, that's always exciting, trying to get the drone safely back to the boat, without losing it. So yeah, I think that's a couple of things that come to mind. But yeah, definitely, yeah, understanding the behavior of the animals is what's going to really allow you to to get that footage.
Wonderful. Thanks, Havish. Okay, Hayes, I kind of have a tough one for you here, but I know that you have been working in wildlife documentaries for a long time, so I'm sure this is one that has come up before and that you have a good answer for. So Jesse is asking sort of, where do you draw the line, or what is an acceptable level of impact when trying to document wildlife for the purposes of education? And does it come down to what influences behavior? And sort of, where's that balance between sort of making sure we get this amazing footage and making sure we don't impact the animals?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to be honest, I think not impacting the animals is the highest priority that we have as filmmakers. And to be just like totally honest with this, if if your boat is too close to animals, they're not going to be acting naturally in the first place. And what we're aiming to capture is real behavior, real stories, and so we have to give the animals space to do what they're going to do. And if we're not, then we're not doing our job well, and we're not going to be seeing these amazing behaviors. So yeah, it's always a high priority for us.
Fantastic. Sorry, I lied. I'm going to give Christy one more question because I just remembered we had a question submitted from a 5-year-old named Meryl, and obviously we need to answer the 5-year-old's question. So Christy, this is the last one for you before we ask the panel all one more question. And 5-year-old Meryl wants to know, how are humpbacks connected to sea wolves? So another iconic animal on our coast who's also recently been the topic of a documentary. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think what a great question, because it really speaks to that whether a species spends more of its time on land or more of its time in the water, they're all really connected through these really productive waters, through the fish that are caught by humpback whales, but that also fertilize trees on land when they're brought there by land animals. The whole ecosystem is so connected. So you might think, oh, a wolf that walks around on land and swims occasionally might not be that close to a humpback whale, but the same productive ecosystems that are allowing humpback whales to return to this area are feeding species like wolves as well. And Jackie, I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Yeah, that like the wolves, what Meryl probably knows is that the wolves along the coast of BC are like eating fish, and they're eating things from the ocean. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so this idea that there isn't a connection between land and sea, usually 5-year-olds know that there certainly is, right? And we've been talking a lot about trap feeding, but actually the whole reason, like, is it nice that people know about trap feeding? This is about poo. This is really the reason that we were involved. It is that one humpback whale is doing the work of 30,000 trees, and trees are super important, but we think that the ocean is separate from land, and then we don't realize that we almost lost the big whales because we used to think differently about things. Now we get a second chance with them, and they're doing work that is absolutely important to the wolves, the bears, and the humans. Yeah, and all the little stuff as well is that they're making oxygen, they're making food, and they're taking in the gas that we humans make too much of. So that's a pretty good reason to be really happy about humpback whales and their poo.
And thank you to 5-year-olds for reminding
Yeah,
us about all of these
exactly.
connections. It is so important.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I am so sorry to everyone whose question we didn't get to. Thank you for submitting them. We will continue to try and address these through our social media and through blogs. And if you haven't yet already, I'll put a little plug in for our BBC email series where you can learn even more about sort of the concepts behind a lot of what's brought up in the segment as well. But a last question for our panel, which is, I want to hear from each of you, what do you hope is achieved for conservation with the footage? And how do we make sure that these footage is used for conservation? So I'm going to start off with Hayes for this question, and then we'll go down the line there.
This footage, what I really think is amazing is that we're seeing this like transfer of knowledge with individual humpbacks that we, it's so rare to see that anywhere. And to be able to tell that story, I really hope that this is a story that people watch and it sticks with them. And when people see whales like this, they connect with them. And when it comes down to protecting areas, it really has a lot to do with people remembering and connecting with these whales. And I hope that a story like this is one that really stays with people who watch the Planet Earth series.
I think it's always neat thinking of, millions of people watching this footage and watching Conger go about his life. But I think often these stories can be told about faraway animals without real context, without real actual benefits to the health of these communities that the animals are from. So I think it's really exciting for me thinking of more local viewers watching this footage, and folks from the coast and folks from Vancouver Island, realizing how incredibly special this story is, this story that's unfolding right in their backyard. So I think that has some real, yeah, that I think that has some real, maybe some real possible effects on people. And something I was thinking about when I was droning is, as neat as the trap feeding is, um, it strikes me that when there's large balls of herring around, generally conger is going to go for just lunging through them and taking huge big mouthfuls as opposed to hanging at the surface with his mouth open. So I think I would love it if this whole sequence made us think about the herring a little bit more and how we manage herring on this coast. It seems like we have a real opportunity to decide, yeah, how we want to relate to these whales again, and how we want to relate to their food that they require. So my hope would be that, yeah, that maybe we don't necessarily just manage herring for sustainability on the coast, but maybe we manage them for abundance in a way that would allow conger to, have huge balls of herring to lunge through whenever he feels like.
To eliminate trap feeding, because there's just so many bait balls of herring everywhere. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you also for bringing back to this sort of this local point, something that we're really passionate about at MERS too. So thank you. Christy, to you, what do you hope is achieved for conservation with this footage?
Yeah, well, I think adding to the point brought up by Tavish, and that's certainly been a theme throughout the night and through this this sequence that we're part of, is again that, humpback whales, conger, one, we can kind of speak to, like, a whale isn't a whale isn't a whale. We know conger has learned this feeding behavior. We can follow this one whale and know, what he has learned to do and his behaviors. But through doing that, we're not just telling the story of one whale, as cool as it is to have one whale that's one local whale. We're talking about how the poo of that whale fertilizes the ecosystem. We're talking about how, from iron all the way up to whales, everything in the ecosystem is so connected. And I think being able to go from, this story about this one individual whale that we knew that did something really cool, and being able to kind of zoom out to the overall impacts of, how we have, as humans, have changed the ecosystem through fishing herring, through climate change, through habitat destruction, through all these different impacts that we've had. I think this story of connection is so important. And I think, the most thing I can hope for is that every once in a while, people in their everyday lives think about conger, and it inspires people to think a bit differently about what they're doing. That story of connection really gets to people.
Terrific. And before we hear from you, Jackie, let's hear from Bertie one last time.
As wildlife filmmakers, we're always trying to figure out what is our impact, what's our quantifiable impact, because we're often always kind of contributing towards the general wave of positive energy around the natural world and getting more and more people excited in the natural world. And that's amazing, but it's quite hard to quantify that impact. So I hope the quantifiable impact as a result of this sequence is really raising the profile of humpback whales and the amazing local conservation work being done on Vancouver Island. And, it's a real good news story, because so many places around the world, nature is on the back foot. And this is a message of hope that when we protect wildlife, it will come back on this amazing scale. These humpbacks, not that long ago were just not present. Now they're everywhere. And of course, now, fast forward, that's this amazing message of hope, but them coming back has now, there's now a new set of challenges as they, as we have to share the water with them with other boating activities. So I hope that it raises awareness of those humpbacks, gets people to drive boats more carefully around them, and of course, contributes to the big issue of the herring fishery, and figuring out how to manage that for the benefit of the whales, and all the wildlife and people, because that is the key for conservation to be successful. Is the strategy has to be good news for wildlife and good news for people. But yeah, just want to say a big thanks for this Zoom meeting being organised and the amazing work that MERS do. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you there, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Fantastic. Jackie, over to you.
Yeah, so if this was just about filming trap feeding, what would that have done? It would have been pretty footage. People may have watched it zoning out, having a beer and drinking, like having popcorn. We weren't interested in that. This has to be about the big picture of conservation. And so it is about having a second chance because we didn't push a species over the edge. And then what you find out is the incredible importance of whales. Again, they are helping in feeding the ecosystem, producing oxygen and removing carbon. That is the key thing. It is one humpback, 30,000 trees that we really want to stick with people. But on a local level as well, like touching on what Tavish has said, so many British Columbians think that humpbacks feed in warm water. We have the curse of cold, dark water where people can't see the fish. They can't see the other life down there. Hell knows that some of us on this call are working to try to improve that. But that I hope comes out of this. Like, this is here. They chose to film here. Yeah, this is what's like, yes, these are the waters that sustain giants, the cold waters. Humpbacks lose so much weight when they go to warm water. So that is a huge thing on a local level that I hope happens, but also do something. There's still so many ways to kill a whale. Yeah, we are literally driving large vessel traffic through our consumer choices. Yeah, where things are coming from. We're driving it through our energy choices. We impact it by how we vote. Yeah, by how fast we drive our boats. So this next piece that we so thankfully had a chance to work with the BBC as well touches on that. But this has to be about action, about compelling more for the whales, because if the whales are okay, we're okay.
Such a great way to lead us into our wind down for the night, which is looking at the web exclusive made by BBC with the footage from Hayes, Tavish, and Bertie that allows Jackie and Christy to talk a little bit more about how we have the second chance and where do we go to from here.
It used to be such a rarity that we even saw one in this area where they belonged. They were whaled out of this area. I can remember seeing the first two together, and that it brought me to tears because it was such so moving to think that they might be making a comeback despite everything that we had done to them. For humpbacks, it is a rare good news story where we humans get a second chance with giants. We whaled them in British Columbia up till 1967. We didn't push them over the brink. In 2003, in the whole year, we identified 7 individual humpbacks, and now it's up to 106 in the same area. We're only just discovering how important whales are for the health of the whole ecosystem. Their feces fertilizes the water and boosts the food web from the bottom up. There is the realization that there's still many ways to kill a whale. The threats that humpbacks are facing are certainly collision, entanglement. Those are very direct impacts to them. and also impacts of noise.
There's one issue that we can tackle right now.
We have such great concern about collision between boats and humpbacks. And that is everything from recreational boats to sailboats to the large vessel traffic that we literally fuel with our consumerism. The risk is incredibly significant. It is such a huge part of our work to try to reach boaters for the sake of their own safety and that of the whales. And yet the average boater doesn't realize that the whales are not traveling in a straight line. They don't realize that the humpback so often and other baleen whales don't know where vessels are. They don't have the echolocation that toothed whales have. They can be resting right below the surface. They can suddenly become acrobatic. It is truly incredibly problematic. There are examples of whales I know that have died as a result of collision with boats. There are those like Slash who bear the scarring of a propeller down her back. We even have a calf from this year who's less than a year old and has already been hit by a boat. That they survive is remarkable, and of course what we can't capture is how many die and sink to the bottom of the ocean. The solution is education. The solution is to have the understanding baleen whales are different. It starts with understanding why they're here. It is the cold, dark waters of the world where humpbacks feed. Our core messaging to boaters of any kind is to see a blow, go slow. And we hope that that captures that they understand that a whale could surface anywhere, really unpredictable, and they have to undertake the vigilance because the whales have something else to do. They are feeding, bulking up. So see a blow, go slow.
For me, seeing the return of humpbacks gives me hope that we can turn things around, not just for the whales, but for all life.
Gives me goosebumps every time. Thank you to all of you for that incredibly impactful piece. That final view of the blow in the past there is spectacular. So just really, really amazing. I want to say thank you to our panel for being here tonight. You've provided us lots to think about. You've provided a feast for our eyes in this incredible footage and lots of amazing conservation messages as well. I know us at MERS, we've been really grateful for this, global platform to talk about the whales, not only for their inspiration, but also their contribution to conservation. But as we've all just hinted at, there's still so much we need to do to make sure that the oceans are protected and that the inhabitants are flourishing as well. And of course, we can't do this alone. We need everybody's help. And so we'll move to the next slide here. We do really want to encourage you to stay part of the MERS community and keep learning and sharing about what you've learned. The web exclusive you just saw is available for anyone online to watch. You can link to it and share it out there so everybody knows not only about humpbacks and their contribution, but what we need to be doing as well to take action to support them. If you want to learn more about some of the campaigns we have going, some of the education that we have, and ways that you can engage with MERS through social media and through our newsletter, please check out merssociety.org/get involved. And then Finally, I do want to recognize that so many of you did donate when registering for the event tonight. Thank you so much. If you want to support our ongoing research and education work to learn more about the whales, threats to them, and what we can do to reduce it, you can use the QR code on the screen right now, or you can link to our donation form at mersociety.org/donate. As a Canadian charity, our work is funded by the generosity of so many that also want to work to protect our ocean as well. So as a final wrap up, we're almost at 9 o'clock. The last thing we have to do is our draw for our Conger Humpback sponsorship. So Effie, who is our winner tonight?
Our winner is Rebecca Crilly.
What was that? Sorry, Effie, say it again.
Sorry, I didn't wait for the drum roll to be done. Rebecca Crilly, congratulations.
Rebecca Curley, we will be in touch. We should have your email from your registration, and we will get you that that humpback sponsorship. Should you want to also sponsor Conger, you can do so on our website as well. So once again, thank you to Jackie, Christy, Hayes, and Tavish. We really appreciate you being with us here tonight. And to Bertie, wherever he is in the world right now, and to all of you for helping celebrate this really monumental moment for MERS. So thank you and good night.